So the PFL 2022 championships just wrapped up, and I know that right now PFL have started their scouting process for next year. I left a comment on their Instagram post when they announced their new challenger series, and I said, do you need a scout, PFL? They didn't reply to me. They've got no idea who I am. They don't care about me, but I'm making these videos anyway, and maybe, just maybe, you see someone on this list here that I've made of very, very high level prospects in the PFL next year. I won't take any claim for it. These guys are all somewhat well known around the scene, but like, these are great fighters. And the reason for me making this video is we're trying to build up PFL's roster to be super, super high level. Like, these guys, in my opinion, a lot of them would make it as far as the semi-finals in the 2023 season. But next year, man, you've got guys like Brendan Loughnane, I believe, is going to be making his return. You're going to have Shane Burgos as well. I think Shane Burgos is going to be a top dog at 145 pounds. But why not add a couple of more of these names that I've got here? I will quickly mention that I do have a new little overlay. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. I think it looks a lot nicer than what it used to. But let's just get straight into it. As I said, a lot of these guys, they're well known, but I feel like the secret to this is finding guys that, in my opinion, or to my knowledge, aren't on an exclusive contract and will be free to sign. The first one is Saladin Panase. This is the guy the UFC needs to sign, and they need to sign him soon, because otherwise Bellator's going to pick him up, 1FC's going to pick him up, KSW's going to give him an exclusive contract. Like, something's going to happen. They need to sign Saladin Panase right now. He's got a 17-1 record. He's avenged that loss. He's only 24 years old. This is a great move for PFL. The thing is, there might be a little bit of an asterisk beside him. Like, I'm not 100% sure if this contract that he's got with KSW is exclusive. Like, I don't know if he's locked down to a contract and potentially isn't able to actually sign elsewhere, but I feel like maybe PFL could throw a little bit of money at Saladin Panase. He's got that win back against Daniel Torres where he lost by TKO. He got it back by decision. He's a champion now at KSW. He's really building a name for himself. 17-1 record at 24 years old. You know, this guy, you may not favour him to beat someone like Brendan Loughnane, but I can tell you this guy will very likely make it all the way through to the semi-finals, at least in the 2023 season. Very exciting prospect. The next one here, he's not a new signing for PFL. He's actually already been signed to the PFL in the past. Mavlid Kabuliev, he's got a 19-0 record. Very underrated fighter in my opinion. And when you're looking at him, man, he's got a win over Chris Wade. He's beaten Brendan Loughnane by split decision. He's beaten Lance Palmer. Like, these three are like the three big dogs in the PFL right now. Lance Palmer, Loughnane, and Wade are three of the big names, you know what I mean? And he beat them all. He became the champion when he beat Chris Wade. And, you know, he hasn't really fought since last year. He hasn't fought since last year at all. He's got a win over the current champion. I'm not too sure. Maybe he's retired. I didn't actually look into that too much. But, Mavlid Kabuliev, where are you at, man? Like, why don't you come back? And we move on. Rustam Kerimov, another guy with this insane record. There are quite a few guys with their surname ending in "ov," by the way, in this video. But I'm trying to find unsigned prospects. Like, it's so hard to find unsigned prospects that aren't like from this sort of area, because a lot of the American guys have been picked up by Bellator. A lot of guys in Asia have been picked up by 1FC, or someone like Ryzen's got them. So Rustam Kerimov, 17-0 record, and he's beaten good guys too. He's signed to ACA. Once again, I'm not 100% sure if this guy's got an exclusive contract. Maybe he's signed to ACA and PFL aren't going to be able to grab him. But the guys that he's beaten are good, man. You're looking at 20-4, 27-6, 28-8, 15-3, 22-4, 20-2, 21-11. Like, this guy's whole record for the most part, even when he beat a guy that was 10-0 when he was 5-0. This guy's whole record all the way up until he was about 6-0 is a little bit sketchy. But after that, this guy's been beating so many good opponents. He's such a good featherweight right now that may be unsigned. I did actually notice though that his last weigh-in was at 135 pounds, so he's probably a bantamweight, and the PFL doesn't have a bantamweight division, so he would have to fight at 145. But I think Rustam Kerimov would be a guy to pick up. Islam Omarov, another guy with an undefeated 12-0 record, and the reason why I know about this guy is because he beat Bibert Tumenov, and Bibert Tumenov is low-key a guy I keep my eye on because he's really good, but as soon as he loses to someone, I know that there's someone special. Timur Kizriev got picked up by Bellator. He lost to Islam Omarov. Like, these are special guys. He's beaten good guys too. 19-3 record as a win in his last one is not a joke. And Bibert Tumenov is a guy that probably would make a big name for himself. But you got to look at the guys that he's lost to, such as Islam Amarov, and he's beaten this Bibrat Timonov. He beat a 9-1 opponent before that, 19-5 times 2. And he's got an opponent here, a 15-3 record. He's signed to ACA, so once again that could be an exclusive contract. But just a guy to keep your eye on, very exciting prospect. Now we move on to a little bit of international fighters. You got a fighter from Uruguay here, Eduardo Garagori. To my knowledge, I don't think PFL's ever signed someone from Uruguay, and Garagori, in my opinion, would make a lot of sense as a signing. You know, this guy's a featherweight, he is 33 years old, so if they're going to sign him, they have to sign him now. It's not like they can put a bookmarker on him, have a look at him every year or so, every 6 months ago, and have a look-see. And another thing is that I did notice was that he has lost in the UFC. This is actually something that I completely forgot about before I started recording the video, but it was obviously something I looked at. He's got a win in the UFC, and one thing that the PFL does love to do is sign former UFC fighters. He lost to Ricardo Ramos and Darren Elkins, who are both still in the UFC, and since then he beat an 8-0 opponent. In my opinion, I mean, it's pretty obvious this guy does not have an exclusive contract right now, and I think that he would be a good signing. Eduardo Garagori, 14-2 record, former UFC fighter. PFL is not opposed to signing former UFC fighters whatsoever. Like, look how many former UFC fighters are on this one. Larissa Pacheco, former UFC fighter. Brendan Loughnane, Dana White's Contender Series. He's on the Ultimate Fighter as well, if you didn't know that. Matteo Scheffel was on Dana White's Contender Series. Aspen Ladd, former UFC fighter. Olivia Olbermosti was former UFC. Stevie Ray. Go down. Wilkinson and Akhmedov, Marlon Moraes and Shaman Moraes were both UFC fighters. Natan Schultz, he wasn't, sorry, I got that wrong. Jeremy Stevens, Gleison Tebow, they're all former UFC fighters. PFL's got no problem with signing former UFC fighters, so I don't know, Eduardo Garagori, very good prospect. This is another one here, another one where PFL could swoop in and take Keisuke Sasu out of the UFC conversation, and you may recognize the name Keisuke Sasu. It's because he actually is somewhat closely affiliated with the UFC. He's only 28 years old, he's got a pretty good record of 10-2, and he's beaten good opponents as well, especially recently. You may notice though, this one loss comes to Road to UFC finalist, actually, Zayed. You're going to see him in the finals and of Road to UFC. And he just beat Balajin on Road to UFC as well. To my knowledge, the UFC hasn't signed this guy, although we did beat Balajin, who was a guy who I've been screaming his name from the rooftops. And PFL could pick him up. You know, they picked up a Japanese fighter in the last season. I forgot his name now, but in my opinion, I think Brendan Loughnane robbed him. But anyway, yeah, I don't see why Keisuke Sasu can't be the Japanese signing of Ryoji Kudo. That's the name I'm thinking of the PFL next season. The last two guys that I'm going to be talking about are probably guys that are going to get signed to the PFL. If they get signed to the PFL, Paul Hughes is probably going to get signed to the UFC. But if PFL picks up Paul Hughes, they could throw him in there with the regular season. Or I know that PFL is doing PFL Europe, and I'm going to make a completely different series about that as well, about fighters, in my opinion, that PFL should sign for the PFL Europe tournament, which is going to be like their normal tournament, but I think that the cash prize is going to be less, and then the winner of the whole tournament is going to be in the PFL International Tournament next year. I know it's confusing. I personally am not a fan of the PFL tournament system, but it is what it is. Paul Hughes, in my opinion, is a guy, if PFL signs him, they'll probably just sign him to the European season, or they might just sign him outright, or the UFC might beat them to it. In my opinion, I think the UFC is very likely to beat PFL to sign in Paul Hughes, as he's just a great prospect. His one loss was to Jordan Vasenik by split decision, and since then, he's bounced back with 3 wins in a row, and a dominant win over Jordan Vasenik as well. So Paul Hughes, very good prospect from Ireland as well, could make a name for himself in the PFL if the UFC doesn't pick him up, but I'm pretty sure UFC is going to take this guy. Moving on, the guy that he just beat, Jordan Vasenik, 9-2 record, 26 years old, just lost to Paul Hughes, and before that he was on a good win streak. He lost early on in his career, beat Paul Hughes by split decision, and won a couple of times, then lost to Paul Hughes. Now, this isn't a guy that I think the PFL would just sign straight to the PFL international season. Jordan Vasenik is a guy that I think PFL will probably pick up for the European season, because he is coming off a loss, but we do know PFL isn't too opposed to signing fighters off a loss, because they're signing fighters for a tournament. You know, they're not signing guys that have to kind of build themselves up into the rankings. They're signing guys to be part of a tournament and fight whoever. So signing guys off a loss isn't a problem for the PFL, especially if they're going to be doing something in Europe, which is going to be a lot more specific. And I feel like UFC's not going to sign Jordan Fasenik off a loss. Bellator might. But I think PFL, they've got free reign to Jordan Fasenik here unless he's got a really good Cage Warriors contract. But I feel like PFL is going to throw a lot more money at Jordan Fasenik than Cage Warriors will if they try to sign him. And I think it makes sense. I feel like they put this guy on the European season. He is one of the best European featherweights out there right now, aside from Paul Hughes, who we just lost to. And I think that PFL European season could be big. They might even just sign them both. And imagine if Jordan Fasenik and Paul Hughes have a trilogy in the European final. It could be massive. But that's kind of like my opinion of top prospects that I think are not signed, to my knowledge, are not signed to exclusive contracts. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know if you think I missed someone. That's very important. If I missed someone, I might not even have them on my radar, and I might not even know about them, so it could be good to know. But yeah, Paul Hughes and Jordan Fasenik, I feel like these two, if PFL were to sign them, it would be to the European season. But as I said, I'm going to make a completely different video, a video series about PFL Europe and who I think they could sign for next year. But man, I can't wait for PFL 2023. I know how much I don't like the tournament system, but PFL does have a very good roster where they can make incredible fights. Like, imagine Brendan Loughnane versus Shane Burgos. Like, do I need to sell you that fight even more? That would be incredible, and it really would show you how good Brendan Loughnane is, because in my opinion right now, if you step back at it, there's a lot of guys in the top 15 that I would pick to beat Brendan Loughnane. But if Brendan Loughnane goes out there and beats Shane Burgos, that completely changes my opinion on everything. I think Shane Burgos was a very highly ranked at 1 point featherweight in the UFC. He's always been an exciting fighter. I think he was in the top 15 at one point, and he was given a couple of top opportunities, like Edson Barboza, for example, and he just slipped up there. But I feel like if Brendan Loughnane beats Shane Burgos convincingly, I think we're going to see, or just believe that Brendan Loughnane is just on a completely different level. And what is Brendan Loughlane's record? Because if you have a look here, he's 32 years old, so I was going to say, like, maybe if he was a little bit younger, the UFC could throw some cash at him. But the thing is, he has lost. I know a lot of people don't really like it, but the truth is he has lost both opportunities to get into the UFC. Like, he lost on The Ultimate Fighter, he was signed to the UFC, and then he lost to Mike Wilkinson. And then you go up higher up in his career, and you see his win over, who was it, Bill Algeo, and just squeaked past Bill Algeo and went for that takedown, which is now super controversial, and everyone hating on Dana White for it. But it is what it is, man. I think that PFL next year is going to be great, and I feel like if they sign one of these guys, Saladin Panase, signing to the PFL would make international headlines. This would be huge, because the UFC, man, the UFC needs to stake their claim on this guy right now. He's 24 years old, 17-1 record. They could pad that record. That's a lot to work with. They could give Saladin Panase like 4 gimme fights to start his career, and you've got a guy with a 21-1 record, and you only be like 24, 25, 26 years old at the time. Like, that's a good guy to build up. And even then, like, maybe UFC, if you're watching this video, look at Rustam Kerimov, you know, the bantamweight division could do with a 17-0 prospect. Like, you know, like, these are like guys that I'm finding for you. You don't have to go out and find these guys. I'm doing it for you. And even Movlid Kabuliev, I don't know what he's up to next year. But if he's retired, then that's all good for him. But maybe, man, like, maybe that million is running dry and he wants to come back. I don't know. That yeah, I'll leave the video there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I really like making these kind of videos. They get me excited, man, because like making videos about prospects is like kind of like my favorite sort of thing to do. They don't really get any views, but it's what I want to build my channel around. You know, I kind of want to be known for this sort of content, and I want to keep kind of trying to do something like this, you know. Like, there's not a lot of prospects in New Zealand, so I can come out with like a very unbiased point of view, in my opinion, because I'm from New Zealand, man. Like, a lot of these guys, like, I don't mind if someone's from USA or if they're from the UK or whatever. I don't really have a bias, because I'm looking at a lot of these fighters from an unbiased perspective, because there's not a lot of Australian or New Zealand or even like Pacific Island MMA fighters out there. So yeah, let me know what you think again in the comments, and my intros are always way too long, outros are always way too long. I'll see you in the next one.